Years and years I was doing it. I was doing it from the left. I was saying, guys, let's stop calling everyone racist. Let's stop calling everyone a bigot. Let's make sound arguments. All of these things. Not everyone who's against gay marriage the second you turn for gay marriage is a homophobe, unless Barack Obama was a homophobe the first time he ran for president, as well as Hillary Clinton. Trump is not a Nazi, and the people that vote for him are not Nazis, and he's not Hitler. And the more that you guys do these types of things, instead of making sound arguments, the more that you're going to, man, I got to get off this hill, the more that you're going to pin yourself into an intellectual corner.
Fighters, comrades and friends, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to Accra and to this conference of African freedom fighters and supporters of the growing movement for Africa's liberation and unity. It is good for our cause to have a periodic meeting of this kind to examine our position in the great struggle to rid Africa completely and forever of imperialism and its handmaidens, colonialism and neocolonialism. It gives us the opportunity also to review our strength as well as that of the enemy, and to reorganize our forces and our strategy in order to carry the struggle forward to victory. We have shaped a destiny for ourselves, and no one can alter the course of that destiny. It is the destiny of complete freedom for Africa, the total liberation of our continent, and its political and economic unification. We have achieved some measure.
Welcome to the Michael Brooks Show. I'm Michael Brooks. We're broadcasting live from downtown Brooklyn, USA, where left is best, as it is everywhere else, with super producer Matt Leck.
Hello.
Chief economist and Brexiteer David Briscoe.
How's it going?
On this week's program, we're back. Missed everybody. Talking about a left strategy for the UK, the European Union, post not good results in the European Union elections. We also have a couple of shout-outs, huge demonstrations across Brazil against Bolsonaro's assault on education and to free political prisoner Lula da Silva. Also, the United Kingdom greeted Donald Trump as he should be greeted, with disgust and disrespect. Shout out to them.
I didn't know they were nasty.
They're very nasty people, not good players. Then Hasan Piker makes his debut on TMBS. And what are we going to do? We're going to pollute my mind right after my meditation retreat. And just, I don't even know. This is like post-dunking on Dave Rubin after the meltdown of last week. I'm kind of shocked watching it, but we'll have some fun with that. Also, Steven Crowder. Maybe another one of these pernicious things we got to pay a little bit of attention to.
Getting backed up on alt-light autopsies.
Yeah, it's alt-light autopsy week here on TMBS. I'm on a friggin' alt-light retreat, for God's sake. And
open another morgue vault.
Yeah, exactly. John Delaney and John Hickenlooper, they really suck. They're corporatist dorks. They both got booed at the California Democratic Convention. Hasan and I are going to watch and enjoy and tell you what this means for the 2020 presidential election and Medicare for all. And then the great Milton Allimadi returns to studio, where we are talking about Thomas Sankara, one of the most important revolutionaries that you may have never heard of. extraordinary leader, inspiring story, African socialism, plus the current crisis of Uganda, the dictator Museveni and his relation to the global far-right trends, Milton's activism there in the post-game, an update on the crackdown against the democracy labor movement in Sudan. As in all of these situations, it's not about the leader. It's not Bashar al-Assad. It is the whole system itself. We've got a gem with David Griscom. We've got a ton to get to in the postgame, including a new debunk, really important clips of the Lula interview with Glenn Greenwald. Bernie Sanders is going after the military-industrial complex. Pete Buttigieg is reminding everybody of how destructive the West Wing is. And I think, can we finally let go of this concept that Pete Buttigieg is smart?
They call him Dumb Pete.
Dumb Pete. Or that speaking multiple languages means that you have any type of remotely coherent strategy for saving us from a right-wing judicial dictatorship in the United States.
You learned languages in 6th grade.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think in any of those languages this Supreme Court plan would make anything less than embarrassing reading, and that's why it's this week's bad segment. All that and much, much more on this week's Michael Brooks Show. But first, let's talk about what happened in European Union elections last week. It was overall mostly negative results from a socialist and democratic perspective. The far right continues to surge across Europe, in France, in Italy, rising margins in Germany as well. And of course, the Brexit party under the quintessential British clown fascist Nigel Farage had excellent results for itself. Now, we shouldn't overread these results, frankly. The Labour Party had bad results in the UK, but not as disastrous as some people would make it out to be. And there are some lenses of hope. In fact, Mark Bottega, who's been a guest on this show on the future of European socialism, was elected to represent European Parliament from Belgium on a new Communist Party democratic platform. So there are positive signals here as well. And we need to get back to like the core strategic frame of how to understand these results and the best way to deal with them. The Remain versus Leave frame in the UK remains a bad one. It's a frame of cheap culture war pugilists and fascists like Nigel Farage, and it is also a frame that helps parties like the Liberal Democrats. The Liberal Democrats have been surging in the UK. The Liberal Democrats who entirely discredited themselves when they joined the David Cameron government in 2010 and served into 2015, gutting the United Kingdom, increasing poverty, slashing services, generating the crisis that has led to the rise of parties like the UKIP and the Brexit Party and the crisis of Brexit itself. But the Liberal Democrats, who were not even committed to caucusing with center-left forces in the European Parliament and have consistently favored big business and austerity, were able to position themselves perfectly to exploit the concerns of affluent, metropolitan Remain voters. Now, these voters are not getting spoken to by Labour at the end of the day. Labour lost significant seats. And in Germany, we saw the SPD have a disastrous result, as well as Die Linke, the left party in formation in Germany, also having subpar results as well. Now, the path forward for the Labour Party in particular is very complicated because on one hand, all sincere people in the British left, including people like Novara Media and people who are actually committed to the democratic socialist project and saving the United Kingdom from the Tories, from the fascists, and from the remnants of Tony Blair's New Labour project, have maintained correctly that Brexit is the product of a longer formation of crisis in the United Kingdom, that it is not the only crisis in the United Kingdom, that rapidly exploding rates of poverty and inequality and gutting of services and handing over of the economy to the city, the United Kingdom's version of Wall Street, is the fundamental structural problem. However, we've run into a point where, while Labor is absolutely correct that there must be another election, with Theresa May, of course, now resigning, the next prime minister not being elected directly from the people, but from a party, as an example, which is practiced at times in the UK, but adds to the illegitimacy of this reckless Tory government. The Labour Party under Corbyn has actually been enormously effective, even though they've been under constant onslaught from the media, the corporate classes, backstabbers from the center and the right wing of the Labour Party, and of course, all of the right-wing formations in the UK. They have put back on the table actual plans to protect labor, to democratize business, to save and expand the NHS. An NHS that, by the way, private companies in the United States are gunning for and will be under threat in any liberal Democrat, Tory, or right-wing Labor government, without any question. Corbyn has also blocked Theresa May's worst impulses and worst plans on Brexit. That said, even as I have made this argument many times myself, that yes, should the frame be away from remain or leave and back to class? Absolutely. But the reality is that Brexit is enough of a crisis, and there is enough of a constituency that primarily do see politics through that filter, because it is the primary engine of at least media crisis and actual crisis in the UK right now, that the Labour strategy of 2017 is not working in 2019. So what should they do? Following Aaron Bastani of Novara Media, he recommends an acquiescence of a second referendum. The acknowledgement that there is enough serious political momentum here to require giving people the opportunity to vote on Brexit again. And he says, as I've said many times, that the polls indicate that Brexit may well pass again. The people who are fixated on Remain want to highlight the positive results of the pro-European Liberal Democratic Party. The lead vote getter was the Brexit Party. And Jeremy Corbyn, in fact, has been trying to triangulate between a couple of different impulses. One, he represents an actual democratic socialist position, which has a principled critique of the European Union, because the European Union is a transnational capitalist institution. That's number one. Number two, he is reaching out to and speaking to most Labour Party voters who are opposed to Brexit. However, there are many Labour constituencies that voted for Brexit, versions of their own sort of outraged populist class voting on Brexit. So it's a very difficult political proposition, and it has been used relentlessly. Most recently, Alistair Campbell, Tony Blair's former top spin doctor, who helped lead the UK with a vicious propaganda campaign into the invasion of Iraq, was expelled from the Labour Party because he publicly said that he voted for Liberal Democrats. Well, guess what? Labour Party rules say if you publicly state you vote for another party, you're gone. There's nothing melodramatic about this, but it's been used as another front in the attack on Corbyn. Following Bastani, the United Kingdom, the Labour Party, should accept and back a second referendum. But it should also redouble its efforts to, one, absolutely uproot forces in the party opposed to Corbyn and opposed to the democratic will of the party. And then at the same time, and I don't know the answer to this, but there needs to be a serious synthesis that fuses the renewal of socialism and class politics with what in the bad version is a upper middle class bourgeois politics of identity, as represented by the Liberal Democrats, as represented by the right-wing part of the German Green Party that also had great results in the European elections. With the fact that some of those voters, however, are absolutely right to be terrified at the rise of fascism, want to support an internationalist project and want to put opposing bigotry and xenophobia at the forefront. And while Corbyn and Labour have been principled and clear in speaking very strongly against the bigotry represented by the Tory party and the Brexit party and so on, those two constituencies need to be bridged in a way that renews a cosmopolitan, socialist, and internationalist approach. It may actually be that even some of the arguments and social campaign that Bernie Sanders, as an example, is doing, that seamlessly is weaving together the struggles of the workers at Walmart or Amazon with, as an example, him going and breaking a Ramadan fast with members of the Muslim community. That sort of really clear shared civic commitment against the bigotry of what Trump and Salvini and all these other thugs represent, with that clearly anchored class politics, might be the potential synthesis that we need moving forward. But we need solidarity with Corbyn, and Corbyn needs an innovation and an updating of a position that worked a couple of years ago but needs to be renewed for now, so that, in fact, the Labour Party can finally take power. And as a final word on this, and I'm sorry to be presumptuous, obviously I'm not a citizen of the UK, but we are a solidarity-driven and internationalist show. And I will just say, obviously, goes without, Tories, UKIP, Brexit Party, horrible. But friends don't let friends vote Liberal Democrat. Look up their record. Look up their lies on tuition freeze. Look up the mismatch between their record on ecology and their rhetoric on ecology. The German Greens, much more interesting party with some genuine accomplishments in the environment. But what a profound and tragic danger if the future of ecological politics was divorced from a struggle for dignity and class and the good of all. We need to bridge those divides, and we need to do it in a down-to-earth way and defeat fascism together. For the many, not the few, which should still be Labour's slogan. You guys have anything you want to add to that?
I just wanted to add how it's really important also to recognize how easy it is for the Lib Dems to sort of push Corbyn in a kind of fantastical way in their support of a second referendum. I mean, we've even seen Ed Davey, who's now standing for the leadership of the Lib Dem party, to say that he wants the Queen to come in and block Brexit from happening, and to recognize, and I'm sorry, you see something like that, and you can only imagine how that emboldens the far right in the UK. Because if you start saying things, we're going to throw away, results of elections because we don't like the result, that creates serious crisis.
Well, that goes back to David Adler's research. David Adler, that was in the New York Times about a year ago, that the one group that has the most formal objection and willingness to discard democracy are so-called centrists.
Oh, absolutely.
And this is a party that traces its lineage to John Stuart Mill, saying that the monarch should cancel an election result. People should really take that in a little bit.
So so basically it's like, don't be fooled by them, because they see a huge opportunity to come after a very popular left-wing movement and pull voters away. And they draw those false
equivalencies too, just to add to what you're saying. They're just like Howard Schultz. They say we could never go into coalition with Boris Johnson, but neither Jeremy Corbyn. But because of course, being a buffoonish Brexiteer xenophobe blowhard is absolutely the same as being a principled democratic socialist. That's how demented they are.
The fact is that the Lib Dems aren't going to be able to win a general election on their own policies and merits. They can only try to undermine the Labour Party and the successes that Jeremy Corbyn has had by using this kind of Brexit thing as a shield to pursue their nastier objectives and what they actually will do if they come into power. So yeah, friends don't let friends vote Lib Dem.
Hashtag of tonight's show, friends don't let friends vote Lib Dem. Matt, you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, I just say check out Novara Media if you want to check out this stuff, because I found them, I can't remember, like a year or two ago, and it was nice to see that. That wasn't around when I was in the UK, fact checking that type of media.
No, they're important. Hopefully we'll do some collaborations with them in the future. We have a two-sided shout out. So actually let's do the British part of the shout out first, but we'll gotta give the music to everybody, because I know especially we had a week off, so I'm sure people are really missing the song.
the shoutout, creepy, shoutout, weird. I think that's creepy. It's incredible. Shoutout. This is crazy. Shoutout. This is out of control. Shoutout. That's creepy. Shoutout. That's weird. Creepy. Weird. Crazy.
So in meditation, you can have periods of time and you can start to fade out DJ Daniker's great track.
The fun and games have begun.
Jesus Christ. I had a couple of meditation periods where I could not get that song out of my head. Literally like sitting in a hall in pure silence. Open your eyes, and the only thing are your comrades in front of you, and rows of people sitting, going through whatever particular journey they may or may not be on inside themselves. It's very austere, but there's some flowers, Buddha statue, and then I would close my eyes, return to my breath, and then I would think, this is crazy. This is weird. And then get like an image of like Griscom with just like that most happy smile on his face. Just like, man, that's an awesome song. I was thinking we should start with, let's go to the British one first, yeah? So Donald Trump is in the UK, being who he is. I actually think besides the obvious drama you'd expect, Jeremy Corbyn has condemned him, of course. The London mayor, Sadiq Khan, hit him hard, and Trump first disrespected Corbyn, then he called Khan a stone-cold loser, blah, blah, blah. The most significant thing that Donald Trump said was that he's interested in, and I don't think it's clear he even knows what the NHS is, but I guarantee you that Aetna does, and I guarantee you that the predator, parasite, HMO insurance companies in the United States have their eye, because that's primitive accumulation, friends. Take a public commons and resource like the National Health Service, destroy it, break it up, and turn it into a private sector enterprise that will harm millions of people's health and well-being. That's the agenda for the National Health Service. But he was met by a massive outpouring of activists in London. Let's get a little taste from Trafalgar Square.
NHS, and I want you to say it like you mean it. Like you know,
I like seeing the nuclear arms stuff there too.
Definitely a lot, and also about not invading Iran. That's also really important.
Hands up!
There are definitely some European Union flags there, which makes sense. Stop Trump's nuclear arms, yeah. Trump out, Tories out. General election now. That's a good Labor one. And then this gentleman, do you remember his name, Matt?
His first name was Ollie. I'll look up the
Ollie. So apparently he knew that that Air Force One was going to fly over his land. And so he landscaped a penis over Trump's name. That was pretty beautiful. So shout out and salute to Ollie for greeting Donald Trump as Donald Trump should be greeted.
Yeah, okay. I can't find his last name.
All right, no, it's fine.
It's Ollie. You know who you are, Ollie.
Ollie, we love you. And so let's go to Brazil, where there was also a huge protest last week. First, let's highlight this one. This is a report from Brian Mayer. I'm going to be interviewing Brian Mayer on these protests on Thursday on the Majority Report, and he's a regular on the Michael Brooks Show. Brian Mayer, co-editor of the Brazil Wire, which everybody needs to be reading to understand what's happening on Brazil, and also a reporter for Telesur. Jair Bolsonaro is trying to slash, devastate, and privatize under the guidance of social reactionaries and neoliberal economists, the classic fusion, all public education in Brazil to both create new market opportunities, destroy opportunities for poor people, and eliminate the intellectual infrastructure of thought and resistance in that country. Well, let's do the education one first. So these are a report from Brian Mayer of students demonstrating across Brazil against Jair Bolsonaro's education plans. This is huge. And I think this is just sound from the protest and the visuals. And it should also be noted that Jair Bolsonaro's supporters rallied as well and didn't muster, I would say, less than half of their people, half of the amount of people resisting the Bolsonaro government's attacks on education in Brazil showed up. The Guardian, continuing its atrocious reporting on Brazil, actually attempted to say that they were both in similar numbers, but they were not. And then also this happened. There was a huge and a lot of, and this was, I think it was a one-day festival in, I think in Rio de Janeiro, and in Sao Paulo rather, and it was raining out, but it was a huge festival, free Lula festival. So here's some footage of that, huge turnout. Here's footage of it, Brian Mayer. This is really,
Organização nas ruas.
This is awesome. Lula read a letter. They had a letter from Lula where he said these demonstrations were not just about him, but it was about taking Brazil back for everybody and against the education cuts and against racism. Oh. The Brazilians know how to protest. And this is what we should be doing across this country as well. LulaLivre, man. It's awesome. Shout out to the UK and Brazil protesting. We're going to do a little pitch, and then we're going to go get Hasan Piker. And looking forward to having Hasan on the show. We did a lot of dunking when I was on Hasan's Twitch stream. So guys, even in the past 2 episodes, you had a think tank where we discussed Jeff Bezos' space, how capitalist realism has shrunk our imaginations. What are the tools to reclaiming our imaginations within a socialist and economic context, but also other concepts like acid communism or even the relevance of silent meditation? So those are the types of dives you'll get when we come together as a think tank on this show. Then, with Drew Mikhael from Queen's University, we did an illicit history of Hezbollah. What is Hezbollah? How do they operate? What is the context that they exist in? This is a group that obviously we're no interest in valorizing, but they're spoken about in a stupid one-dimensional way in the media in this country, and they're vital for understanding. They're primarily a fear talking point of people who know nothing about them or are propagandizing about them. We give you these deep contextual understandings of ideas, movements, and governments across the world in the illicit histories, and also the various political, sociological, and philosophical traditions that we are existing in and competing inside that have set our world up on the idea primers and think tanks. So I'm incredibly proud, as I say. For Comrade and Above, we just released our second video, Illicit History, on Medicaid, race, and the conservative states' rights scam. This is a vital thing to understand for the future of healthcare in this country, the fight for Medicare for all, and the assault on women that's happening across this country, and with regards to reproductive justice that we're seeing across states like Alabama and Georgia. So, and then of course in the post game we have a lot of fun. We take your calls, we take your Discord questions, and the Discord community is a whole other massive, thriving, self-propelling community. So we've done really well, and as we continue to grow, it allows us, we already offer quite a bit of things, but it allows us to think of new things to do, things to harness and express even more of the talents, and even bring in more people that, as I say, are around, like Vic Fayana or others in this orbit. In a couple of weeks, we're going to have someone who's been a regular crew on this show, and it's going to be a little bit tweaked because she's going to come in now from time to time in like a co-hosting role somewhat. So that's going to be a different segment spin. And she's also going to cover some stuff related to science and technology, but still, of course, in the flow of the show, so that we can continue to really refine and really enhance what we do, including also now we've done some independent live streams on YouTube. As an example, in the South African elections with Mike Hanna, the Spanish elections with Nando Vila, and next week, the second strategy session with Kyle Kalinske, 5:45 NYC time on the Michael Brooks Show YouTube channel. So everything continues to grow. The last couple week on Patreon, and look, we're good. I'm not gonna lie. We're at over 2,200 patrons, but we need to keep it moving. And we had a real, by our standards, we had a real fall off. Most of it was things like card declines and stuff, so please make sure that everything is up to date for Patreon. But we also lost a chunk of people, mostly because of people dealing with different financial situations. And I do say, if you've hit a financial stumbling block and you've supported us before, send us a message if you want to, figure out another rate, figuring it out. We'll definitely help you out. We want to support people in continuing to get the show content. And then, other people drop out. So people need to step up so we can continue the speed of the momentum and get to this next 3,000 patron goal, because that will, just as 2,000 opened up the video illicit histories, as we continue to expand the numbers, that's going to expand the things that we do. And we want to be at the center of all the things that we care about and are doing. And on every level, including also obviously the co-host, of course, she's going to get, there's going to be money involved, obviously, more resources can be spread around in more different ways. And also, we can just keep growing everything out. So it's time to do that. Patreon.com/TMBS. Patreon.com/TMBS. The other thing it's time to do is get your tickets to the Michael Brooks Show live show in Chicago, Midwest Left is Best Fest. Do we have that up on screen, Matt? It's August 24th, and Gene Bajlan is going to be a guest. Gene. He's the crazy Kurd. He's a professor of history at Missouri State University. We've done a lot of deep dives on Middle Eastern politics, and I believe there's also going to be one other Chicago guest that I think we'll be announcing soon that we're really excited about. But actually, even though we've sort of not talked about this show once, we're already about third sold out. And a lot of people have bought VIP tickets, so there's going to be a lot of people that we're meeting. So I would go grab your tickets today. Lincoln Hall, August 24th, Michael Brooks Show, Chicago. We're excited to see you there. We're going to take a brief break, and we're going to come right back with Hasan Piker on the Michael Brooks Show. Welcome back to the Michael Brooks Show. Joining us now is a gentleman that I've been on his Twitch stream. I guess I'm on his Twitch stream again right now, which I'm glad I didn't have to set up with my computer because that was a fucking nightmare last time, but worth it because we had a lot of fun. He's also a guy that was, in fact, at the LulaLivre show. He's a friend. He's a comrade. He's someone that a lot of people have wanted. They like the meeting of the minds that we have. Hasan Piker, welcome. Thanks for being here, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. You are one of my favorite commentators on the left, so it's an honor and a privilege to be here, and probably the best accent maker impressionist on the left for sure.
Oh, dude, thank you. I'm honored by that. I'm really loving your work too. And when we had that conversation on your channel, which was awesome, because on this show, I mean, especially because someday when you're in New York, you should come in studio and hang out and do a whole show with us, which would be awesome. But, you know, we do like now we're going to talk for like 20, 25 minutes, which is great. But on your Twitch stream, it's awesome that there's a lot of time. And I needed to leave. Like I was like running late for something, but I had a lot of fun with you. So I'd be like, all right, I need to get out of here. And then you'd be like, yeah, but do you want to talk about Dave Rubin? And I was like, fuck, yes.
I love that you guys just pulled up a video. I mean, the Twitch stream of of me watching you. But anyway.
We're watching you watch. Yeah, bro.
It was an awesome time. It sucks that you're super social and have a social life, unlike me. So that's why it's, you know, that's why I'm able to do these like long videos.
Well, I'm stoked to do more of it. And sometimes, yeah, I mean, social life can mean like having to like go to the fucking bank. But let's yeah, I didn't mean it like that. Going to the bank for most of my life has not been fun, bro.
This is something that my community needs to know as well. I don't know if this is an appropriate question to ask, but this is something that has been making the rounds on the left.
Yeah. And
it's a ferocious debate. And it is about, I don't know if I should do this, but fuck it, I'm going to do it anyway. Are you familiar with the concept of dry jacking?
This is a really interesting direction for this show, Hasan. No, I'm not. I'm guessing you are.
Never mind. Let's not do it then. Never mind. It's not. It's just something that everyone wants. This is something that I ask people now, but we're not going to get into
it. Ask me on your. You know what, Hasan? Ask me when I'm on your show, and
we'll do that.
I will get into the details of dry, because you know what the real thing is, man. Is that after it's not just that it's my show, which is, of course, a big deal, but it's also that, you know, do you know who Milton Allimadi is?
I do not.
So he's coming on. He's the second guest tonight. And this dude is like, he's one of the best. He's this Ugandan journalist. He's like a mentor of mine. He's a fucking genius. And he just classes up the whole place. So to me, it's like, I already feel bad enough that we're going to make fun of Dave Rubin before he comes on to talk about like Thomas Sankara. I can't be talking about dry jacking 20 minutes or 30 minutes before Milton Allimadi's on. I can't do it.
I'm so sorry. I know. I shouldn't have done that.
You know what you will like though, Hasan? I'll tell you this story. This is the Milton Allimadi story. I'll tell you. Do you know the right-wing Mandela character?
Yeah.
So, and you know, I'm not gonna lie. I basically don't care, and I'll do whatever impression, and I don't think about it. But that was the only one that I had like a touch of like, shit. I'm turning Nelson Mandela into Gavin McInnes. Like, all right. And so, but, you know, I don't know. Who am I going to ask whether or not that's cool to do? And I remember I sent a DM to Milton Allimadi of a Nelson Mandela thing, and he just wrote back like, LOL, LOL, LOL. And I was like, oh, shit, I am definitely in the clear. So do you want to start with Dave Rubin or these guys at the California Democratic Convention?
I'll do either. It's your show, and I've already disrespected the boundaries by memeing too close, entirely too close to the sun. So let's do whatever you want to do. I'm ready. I'm prepared. And again, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's all good.
But I will ask you in private what the answer to that question is, or when you come back on the show, if you ever want to.
You literally are gonna have to explain what that means to me, though. Like, not right now. But I'm not playing dumb with you. I don't know what it means. My guess would be that I'm too busy with my social life to do that.
Most likely.
Yeah. But
no, this is something that people who have robust social lives don't really talk about for sure. Anyway, let's move on, please. I'm so sorry. It's so cringy. I'm sorry.
I think you do. I think you actually want to talk about this a lot.
No.
I
promise I don't. All right, let's.
I don't believe you, Hasan. What's going on?
I'm sorry. All right, so Dave Rubin, right?
Yeah. Wait. So Hasan, have you ever met Dave Rubin? Do you actually know Dave Rubin?
Yeah, I thought I told you this already. We work together. We play basketball every Sunday. I'm very familiar with him.
So,
what's Dave like on the basketball court?
What position does he play?
Okay, so he's actually not bad. I will have to admit.
All right.
He's not as bad as you would think he is. He's pretty good. He plays like a shooting guard.
Okay.
Pretty much. That's usually. Classic. Relatively athletic guy.
Bradley Beal.
Definitely better on the court than he is in the marketplace of ideas for sure.
Wow. Have you always thought, like, I'm legitimately, because you know that I've asked Anna this, and I'm not trying to be a pain in the ass, and you know that I've, like, how did you guys work? He's so stupid, Hasan. Like, even if he was right, he's a fucking idiot.
Oh, dude. Okay, so here's the thing. Dave Rubin was the first time I really questioned like how much leeway I give to ideological allies, like people who I perceive to be on my side, because I genuinely never realized how dumb he was. You know what I mean? And I don't know if it's because he is kind of a liberal who's like portraying himself as a conservative, and that's why he comes across maybe more stupid now. Or that he was genuinely this stupid this entire time, but because he was a liberal, I just simply did not see it. But yeah, I don't know. It really shocked me to the core seeing how dumb he has become. I don't think he was this dumb, but maybe he was just repeating liberal talking points. So I never really questioned it.
I'm gonna guess that was what was going on, because I have actually looked. I didn't really watch him, or I wasn't really aware of him when he was on TYT, and then I kind of got like, okay, this guy's setting up this new hustle, and he's gonna we were pretty early. I was dunking on Dave Rubin, I think, definitely before it was fashionable, and it was like, so. But I did go back to actually see what he was like on TYT, and it did just seem like somebody else would, articulate a point that they had researched and thought about, and he would just be like, yeah, because, we need the EPA, and here's a Shakira joke, which is my other question, which is he was hired as a comedian.
He was never funny.
What,
he was never funny.
Yeah, what?
I knew that question was coming. I never thought he was funny. He was never actually funny. I didn't really understand why he was hired to begin with. That is a certainty. I can tell you that with a certainty. I just never questioned whether or not he was intelligent, but I never questioned whether or not he was funny. I knew he was unfunny from the moment I met him.
Okay, so that at least has always been clear. Not funny comedian.
Oh yeah.
Now this is super ironic because last week while I was in a silent meditation retreat, dry jerking, I admit it. Now you're not gonna laugh after you put that whole thing on the table. You fucking kidding me?
No, I'm laughing. Oh
Jesus
God.
Christ.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. So easy.
Go on. Sorry.
So I was on a silent meditation retreat, and apparently Dave Rubin. Well, I'll put it this way: he finally put something. Now in his iteration as a conservative, he is actually pretty funny. Check this video out. I'm sure you've already seen it, but we've got to play some of it.
Oh, let's watch it.
So for those of you that aren't playing along on Twitter, God bless you, and you're probably living your best life. But basically, Quillette, which is run by Claire Lehman, who's a former guest of mine, who has been very friendly and nice to me on my show and in all of our private exchanges, has done about 4 hit pieces on me recently, where they're really trying to single me out of the IDW crew, that I'm somehow the worst because I sit down and talk to some people that they don't like, and I talk to these people on the right and I don't question them exactly as they want, and all of these things. And they keep just writing piece after piece. Now, I got a shit ton of haters these days, which really is just a sign that I'm doing something good.
Pause it.
I love that.
Yeah, what do you take as a sign? Yeah, why do you love that, Hasan?
No, it's like, that's what Hitler said too. He's like, haters are my motivators. Like, I guess I must be doing something right if like all these people hate on me. Like, what a ridiculous way. And these people aren't even hating on him. They're saying like it's fine if you're conservative. It's literally Colette. They're also conservative.
Right.
And they're saying it's okay if you're conservative. Just maybe do a better job questioning people like Stefan Molnier when he talks about phrenology or low IQ people as a dog whistle to like ethnic minorities or whatever.
Yep.
But that's all that piece was, right? And
he literally,
it's pretty fair criticism.
He is saying, right, Quillette is making like a brand pivot. And part of it is not ideological, but it's just a recognition that like if you're going to run around and your whole brand is no holds barred, fearless, we talk about ideas, having some like dimwit stare blankly into space while any crackpot, fascist, conspiracy theorist whack job sits on his couch and says anything just isn't a good look, just on a brand level. And his response is like, I'm glad you said Hitler, because when I first saw this, I was like, if I had the budget, it would be like the sketch montage video of like Hitler, al-Baghdadi from ISIS, Jared the subway guy, of just a bunch of people say, hey, everybody hates me. Must be doing something right.
I've never thought that in my entire life. I wish I was like Dave Rubin. I mean, I have a lot of haters, but I've never been like, oh, I must be doing something right because these people hate me.
But
it's always the opposite. I'm always so deeply insecure about all my haters. I'm like, am I doing everything wrong? Dave Rubin, on the other hand, is sucking down a Junior Mint chocolate chip protein shake from the same shop that I go to every now and then as well. They have great protein shakes, but that's beside the point. And having a wonderful day, just raging.
Well, are you sure about that, Hasan? Well, first of all, because I would say I'm like you. I don't like nobody likes getting hated on. Everybody has their insecurities, and I feel like Dave. I don't know, man. This is a walking Periscope rant about how little he like. Do you really think he doesn't care? Because I'm getting a lot of care feelings out of this.
Yeah, you just see that he's shaking in his little booties, freaking out over an article that was like, hey, it's fine if you're a conservative, just admit it. And also when you're, stop platforming white supremacists without asking them questions. I mean, imagine being that bad at your job. Imagine being so bad that conservatives, which notoriously have a low barrier of entry, if you want to be a conservative pundit, are wholeheartedly coming together, banding together to hate on you, including people that have been ousted from the community, like Milo Yiannopoulos. Like, how pathetic do you have to be that conservatives are getting together and being like, dude, we don't want you anymore?
Well, I've always said, I think the only thing that ever struck, like, I think, like, whatever, there actually is a purpose in talking and dunking on Dave and Steve Crowder, which we should talk about for a second, too, because I know you just actually did something on Steve, so let's talk about that for a minute. But there is a substantive purpose because they generate so much negativity and they facilitate so much garbage. And again, it isn't just because they have different politics. It's absolutely because he's like a blank dimwit who has allowed people to spew anything on his show without any critical awareness, while at the same time maintaining the posture that he's, engaging in open ideas and not like essentially, dimwit propaganda. So it actually matters to like clarify the record on what somebody's actually doing in their work. But it's all, but on a personality level and as like a comedian, the thing that's always struck me about Dave, that the key to doing I'm just interested in ideas and I just don't care, I'm just going to live my life, is it's very rare to find somebody who is so, like, he's genuinely a stupid guy. He's not smart. And he's so fucking cynical. Like, that's rare, man. Like, when you meet somebody who's like super craven and just like, whatever, I'm just like, I'm going to do what I do, I don't really care. They're usually a little bit more clever. And people who aren't, and some people who aren't as clever.
Yeah, like Ben Shapiro.
Yeah, Ben Shapiro is not as smart as the New York Times says he is, but he's not like a stone cold moron. And like Dave Rubin is both like super cynical, but also like Bolsonaro. It's far out.
Yeah. It's I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe that's like how you have to be as someone who is from a marginalized background, historically marginalized background, like that you have to be really dumb or just super shameless, like Milo. You know what I mean?
In terms of like the right-wing racket.
Yeah, because like look at Candace Owens. Like, I mean, look at every token, every single race trader or every single like I guess marginalized community trader that goes conservative for the grift comes across really pathetic and stupid, possibly because they can't be too smart, or they can't appear to be too smart. Otherwise, they would have to admit that they're being ridiculous. Right?
I think you're right, but I think as an example, I'm talking just on a very like Candace Owens is obviously, in my opinion, like a really, really bad person promoting lies.
And also really dumb, though. Don't you think Candace Owens
not
is
as dumb as Dave Rubin? No, not as stupid as Dave Rubin.
Really?
No. Dude, I don't know of anybody. I cannot think of a single person with any kind of media platform that is as dumb as Dave Rubin. I cannot. I can't.
Wow. No, I would say Candace Owens is like right up there with how stupid Dave Rubin is. I mean, she said Jeff Bezos was a socialist. Like, she unironically was like, well, Jeff Bezos is a socialist. He wants socialism.
Yeah, but she just says that because, like, here's the difference. Candace Owens has a script, and she's gonna say fucking nonsense. And here's the thing. Here's what I mean about cynical. Candace Owens says that because that's what's to say. And I don't even think she thought about it one way or another. Dave Rubin is the type of guy where Candace Owens says that to him, and he's like, oh my God, I thought Amazon was great. I wanted them to take over the post office. He's a socialist?
I think no one gave him the talking points because they were like, well, this gay dude was also at the Young Turks. Maybe he's an op. We don't trust him. So the Heritage Foundation actually doesn't send him the same talking points that they send to like Steven Crowder and Candace Owens and whatever, which is why he's not in unison with the rest of them. And God knows, none of these dipshits are actually going to do the reading. Obviously, they're not going to like go and read like, I don't know, Milton Friedman or whatever to figure out or to like morally justify their axioms on the conservative end. They're just getting the talking points. That's why they all sound identical.
That's right.
And I guess Dave Rubin, for some reason, didn't get those talking points, and that's why he consistently embarrasses himself in front of actual apes like Joe Rogan. I mean, Joe Rogan
shots fired,
openly
bro.
admits. Yeah, I mean, Joe Rogan openly, he's the first person to admit that. He's not like a very intelligent person, and I think that's part of the reason why he's a likable dude, because he's not a very intelligent person, and because he's not a very intelligent person, he does a pretty decent job of interviewing people in a very positive way and getting them to like describe their perspective and all that. And it can be really damaging if it's, some psychopathic white nationalist.
Right.
But it can be.
He did some good reasoning with Dave on the whole UPS
But yeah, he
thing.
Dunked on Dave. He dunked
and
on
he
him.
wasn't even trying to.
That's how stupid Dave Rubin is.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we have more. You know what? We'll just do another time because there's other people that you and I got to talk about, like Tim Pool and Crowder and all of this. But I want to play these two clips because I thought this was really encouraging at the California Democratic Convention. So first of all, just let's say right out of the gate, Joe Biden wasn't there. Joe Biden is the main enemy in this primary. But you had a couple of people that were there that make Joe Biden look like Nelson Mandela in terms of charisma and vision. Like, where do you find John Delaney and John Hicken? Like, if you just watch these men talk, you're just like, you know what? We're not going to survive as a species. So let's start with John Delaney. Awesome. Oh my God. John Delaney, who is a former health insurance executive, tell the California Democratic Convention of grassroots activists, not just say like, hey, here's my pretend fake Medicare for all plan like some of the other candidates did, but just grow up and insult them.
But we need, as Democrats, to build an economy that works. But it's got to be with smart policies. Medicare for all may sound good, but it's actually not good policy, nor is it good politics. I'm telling you.
I'm telling you.
I'm telling you.
Oh, so good.
100.
the finger.
We should have universal health care. We should have universal health care.
Look at the Toastmasters hand motions.
We should have universal health care. We should have universal health care. But it shouldn't be a kind of health care that kicks 150 million Americans off their health care. That's not smart policy.
Okay, Hasan, how fun was that?
I mean, that's incredible. It's incredible until you realize that his net worth is $92 million, and that's precisely why he's upholding the interests of the pharmaceutical and insurance industries. But it is hilarious, and it is also kind of inspirational. It's good to see. I love to see it. When I see the California Democrats booing someone for speaking out against socialized medicine, I'm happy. I loved it because California Democrats are the really wealthy ones for the most part, aren't they? They're the ones that Hillary Clinton visits and Nancy Pelosi and everyone else visits when they want to raise money at their $250,000 dinner.
That's true, but I bet there was a lot of nurses union people and a lot of really solid grassroots people on the floor. And you know, you're totally right though, because I think even a guy like John Delaney is so delusional that that's the terms he thinks of. He doesn't think of all of the grassroots democratic organizations in California, of union people, of advocates, of people who care about real things for real people. He is thinking like, hey, this is, these are some of the people who might actually write me a check, even though I'll get like less than a rounding error in Iowa before I drop out. But he's so delusional and insulated that he actually goes to a grassroots gathering and thinks like, oh yeah, but they're all just like the Democrats that you were talking about, that people like him and Hillary Clinton associate with California. Exactly. And now, I don't know. Hickenlooper was kind of like doing he was sort of like, I felt like he was kind of like a vice principal sort of, Delaney. And Hickenlooper, I don't know, man. Delaney gave up and was deflated, but he was still kind of like a jerk about it. And Hickenlooper seems even more deflated to me. Let's check this one out.
Before we get to the Hickenlooper one, can I just say one more thing about Delaney?
Yes, please.
What's really interesting to me about the dynamic there of getting booed in that fashion in front of the California Democrats is that it's so obvious to me and to anyone who does punditry on the left that Democrats just refuse, like Democratic politicians just refuse to listen to their constituents. It's so obvious. I mean, these things are polling incredibly well. I mean, these ideas like $15 minimum wage, Medicare for all. I mean, they have overwhelming majority support in the country. Even free college, free education, like, and yet they refuse to advocate for them at the legislative level because they understand that their focus is entirely made up of the same corporate interests that the Republican focuses on. But they have to pay lip service. At least the Republicans have found an effective way to do culture war stuff and listen to their constituents and be like, look, we're not going to give you, we're going to give you tax cuts. Shut up. You're going to like it. It'll be fine. You're poor. It'll hurt you in the long run, but you don't know that. It doesn't matter. But also the immigrants, they're terrible. Like, they do everything they can to appease their constituencies, whereas Democrats so frequently deny that very same thing and expect people to vote for them on the virtue that they are not the Republicans. And this is precisely why, despite the fact that Democrats have the majority in the population, there are more Democratic voters in this nation than there are Republicans, they keep losing elections. Obviously, there are different reasons for it as well, but I think the most important reason here is the fact that they refuse to actually do things that their constituents want.
No, I think you're 100% right. And there's that I think it's something like Republicans fear their voters, Democrats disdain theirs. You're 100% right. And here's John Hickenlooper, again, just with that total disrespect and delusion that Hasan's talking about.
Socialism is not the answer. I was reelected in a purple state in 2014, one of the worst years for Democrats in a quarter century. If we're not careful, we're going to end up helping to reelect the worst president in American history. We should not try to tackle climate change by guaranteeing every American a government job.
Oh, fuck you, dude.
Hold on.
Leadership.
I mean, yeah, integrity, honesty, courage is drinking fracking juice.
Do we have that? I don't know if we have it, but explain to people what you're talking about, though. What do you mean when you say drink?
In an effort to show that fracking juice, that the water that they use to pump out oil from every crevice of the ground, that is shown to taint the water supply. In an effort to act like that was just simply a myth, Hickenlooper drank frack juice.
Oh, we got it. This is John Hickenlooper drinking. This is the guy. Socialism is not the answer, but being such a grotesque shill for companies that destroy our drinking water.
Fracking cum.
Fracking.
He drank it.
Oh, wait, we don't have it? I can't. Oh, we can't play it? All right, let's forget it. So John Hickenlooper drank, what did you say, Hasan? What was the line?
Fracking cum? Tell me that's not alpha as shit, though. Tell me that's not.
I was going to say
that's not big dick energy.
It's it's as big dick energy as John Hickenlooper is capable of. Especially looking at he's just
the Greenpeace guy. For those of you who have seen the new H Bomber video, if you haven't, go check that out on
definitely
on how people lie about climate change, like how Republicans lie about that. The ex-Greenpeace guy, who is now a climate change denier, a very famous one, gets caught in this French interview where where he's advocating for Roundup and how Roundup doesn't cause cancer, and he even goes so far as to say, like, I'll drink a Roundup, like I would even drink it to prove to you that it's not dangerous. And then the guy's like, well, we have it right here. Do you want to do that? Like, do you want to drink this Roundup? And he's like, no, of course not. I wouldn't do that. I'm not an idiot. And Hickenlooper. Respect for him.
I will drink the Roundup because if I don't, Donald Trump will get reelected. Hasan, thanks for doing this, brother. Will you do it again sometime?
Oh, of course, absolutely. Let me know whenever, man. This was awesome. And everybody who's in my chat right now on Twitch, go subscribe to the Michael Brooks Show. It's awesome. Michael Brooks has, awesome guests. Unlike myself, he has actually intelligent guests. And go.
Well, I've been on your
show
stream.
On his Patreon.
I've been on your stream, Hasan. mean, you have
I'm
at least
saying I'm
some
not
smart
an intelligent
guests.
guest of his, but there are actually
Oh,
intelligent
stop with
guests
the
that don't
fucking
talk about
self-deprecation.
dry-jacking.
Stop. I don't buy it. It's awesome having you on. Stop that shit. It's nonsense. There's more stuff for us to do in the future. I really appreciate it. We got to get after, I think, Crowder and Tim Pool. We got to talk more about Turkey and socialism and how we win. At some point, I want to do something with you, me, and Brendan from the Discourse. A lot of plans. Talk to you soon, brother.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, man. Take care.
All right, peace.
All right, folks, here's what we're going to do. Milton Allimadi has entered the building. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do the Gem segment with David Griscom. And then we're going to take a brief break. And then our mentor, friend, excellent scholar, journalist, analyst, Milton Allimadi is here. We're going to talk about Thomas Sankara. We're going to talk about Uganda. And then he's going to stay for at least part of the post game for patrons. But now, David Griscom, did you miss doing your Gem segment last week?
I did. I had to do it for myself for my meal.
Yeah.
It was not
You're trying to corral friends. Were you like, wait, and you were putting the music
I was just yelling
on your iPhone?
I was yelling outside of my apartment window at people on the street. These goddamn tariffs.
All right.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to be talking about.
Griscom Economic Minute. David Griscom.
So last week, there was a big announcement from Trump, unexpected one as is typical, that he is going to be putting new tariffs on Mexico, which is very significant given our close trading relationships with Mexico, and also the fact that this was something that was supposed to be put to bed. There have recently been some sort of trade disputes between the United States and Mexico, which included some tariffs on U.S. imports of Mexican goods, and also Mexico came back with their own tariffs. But these new tariffs, which are going to begin on June 10th, a 5% tariff on all goods from Mexico, that will continue to rise until 25% in October unless Trump's demands are met. His demand is to basically force a sovereign nation to participate in his war against migration. So he's demanding basically that Mexico, one, takes in a majority of people in Central America who have left their homes because of massive economic deprivations in their own country, and for him to militarize his southern border. So this is obviously a significant move because of how close the United States and Mexico are economically. Mexico has said they are looking at ways to retaliate. They could possibly consult the World Trade Organization. This is a very lengthy process, and they have also threatened to enact their own tariffs. And again, this just followed a massive cooling between the United States and Mexico after the last kind of trade spat, and it came out of nowhere. So this initial 5% tariff is definitely going to happen. It's pretty much unavoidable. It could be offset by a continued drop in the value of the Mexican peso, which has already dropped 3% since last week when Trump announced it. So it virtually almost undercuts the tariff in itself, or at least on the Mexican side. And don't forget the background of this too, is that this is in the background of a massive trade war with China, which has no signs of having any kind of finale anytime soon. That's a $730 billion relationship. And this has really created a lot of volatility on the U.S. markets, internationally. I mean, a lot of people are very worried, not only because they see signs of a slowdown within the United States, but also this kind of volatility in the way that we're interacting with our massive trading partners. And let's not forget what's going on with these Trump tariffs, because it's not economically beneficial for the United States to be doing this. We're seeing already a lot of massive impacts from what's going on with China. And there's two things that have basically been going on. One, Trump is trying to assert his dominance over another neighboring power, and that's what's going on with Mexico. That's significant, and something that we really should be clear about. This is an attempt at economic war to try to control the policy of another state. And then in China, what we're seeing is that Trump is trying to revoke a deal that has been made, a dirty deal, don't get me wrong, but a deal between the United States capitalists and the Chinese government, which is that the United States would have access to really cheap, ununionized, worse off working conditions, labor in China in exchange for, one, Chinese access to technologies, 2, access to investment, and 3, access to jobs.
That's the foundation of what they call the G2 relationship.
Yeah, and so what's going on now? So China's rising power, and now they're trying to find a way to pull out of that deal to make sure that China doesn't have access to all of the things that they were supposed to get from this deal. And, you know, the biggest thing about this change with Mexico is that, you know, manufacturing in the United States has really been hit because we lose a lot of access to the raw goods that we need. You had manufacturing in the United States is still 11% of the economy, and in the past few months we've seen a real significant decline in manufacturing growth, and that's because of the uncertainty in the economy that is also just made much worse for people by the uncertainty that's going on with the trade deals. I mean, it's absolutely, you know, something that is significant and that we need to be watching. And finally, when you see what's going on, a lot of companies moved from China to Mexico just in the past year because they were worried about U.S. tariffs on China. And now they're in Mexico, and now they're facing the possibility of more tariffs. And obviously, the United States is a massive economy, and we're not going to get into a place where other countries aren't going to want to trade with us. But you will start to see more and more that companies that can avoid dealing with the United States are probably going to avoid it in a situation where you just have, you know, a president who's just going to be able to willy-nilly slap on tariffs, which massively mess up supply chains and economic relationships across the globe, including, you know, and these companies might even accept higher prices from other countries because they just don't want to deal with the uncertainty of trading with the United States, which is a wild thing to think about.
There you have it. So much winning. I just want to say really quickly too, I don't do a great job of this. I should do a bit better. But in general, you should obviously be subscribing on YouTube and on podcasts to No Filter with Anna Kasparian. It's a great show, and of course, Anna's a really good friend and does great work. And on the latest episode, she had me on, and we did a deep dive on Brazil and Lula, which you should definitely be sharing. And I was actually on Mike Racine's show recently, and on David Feldman's show. So just I should keep people updated. And tomorrow I'm going in to record a video segment with Paste with Walker Bregman. So I got to remember to do more of that. We're going to take a brief break, and then I'm very excited and very honored to welcome back to the show in studio Milton Allimadi. I'm very excited about this. We'll be right back, guys.
Anyway, I hope you're all having a nice day. It's a beautiful day out here.
I knew this day would come, but I didn't expect it so soon. the rats, the hyenas start to eat each other. The fun and games have begun.
Somebody's going to have to explain the whole Fox deal to me. What's going on with Fox, by the way? What's going on there?
Welcome back to the Michael Brooks Show. Joining us now is our esteemed, I have to say, crew, because he is absolutely a regular and one of our mentors and guides. He's also the publisher of Black Star News. He also is an instructor at John Jay College, journalist and analyst, Milton Allimadi. Milton, thank you so much for returning.
Thank you, sir. Always a pleasure.
How are you?
Awesome show you got.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yes.
That means a lot coming from you.
Yes.
How is the mic right? We'll be good. Okay, good. We'll be good. So, just because you've been on the show before, obviously,
Yes.
many times. So I want to start. We'll get to it pretty quickly. I want to talk about Thomas Sankara.
Yes.
We've done an illicit history of Thomas Sankara, which was initially just for patrons. We actually unlocked it. We have a clip that we're going to play to set this up.
All right.
Of a documentary, a French documentary that was made on Sankara. But while we're getting that queued up, can you talk about the different waves and if it's true that there's the African awakening of the liberation struggles? We played Kwame Nkrumah for the Cold Open. Then there's this burst of light in the 80s with Thomas Sankara.
Right.
And then today there's new youth movements resisting austerity, colonial presence of United States, France, and China.
Yes, and tyranny.
So talk about those three waves a little bit, if you
All
could.
right. Okay, very good. Well, the first wave, you're right, was Kwame Nkrumah. This is after World War II, because he started early, actually. You started asking the colonial power in Britain in Ghana, where's the promises that, African soldiers, without African soldiers, Britain, France, all those countries were doomed in World War II. And not a lot of people talk about it today.
Indians, too.
Absolutely.
Indians, all of the
diaspora,
colonial, all of
the Caribbeans, all those were,
all of them. Yes.
That deserves a lot more talking. So I digress a little, but I have to. So, for example, last year I was listening to Macron, forget which country he's from, a West African journalist asked him, said, West Africa is going under intense economic crisis. Don't you think some of these countries deserve like a Marshall Aid type plan so they can get going and equal footing with the rest of the world? And you know what his response was? He said, money is not the real problem in West Africa. The women are having too many children.
Are you? First of all,
up to 8 children they're having. That's the problem.
First of all, I mean, I just meant to say this, and then please keep going on Macron because he's loathsome. But anytime you hear a politician say of anything, it could be as serious as the colonial legacy and economic crisis of West Africa. But even something like kids' school performance here, if they start with, it's not about the money.
There you go.
I can guarantee you that it's about the money.
Yes, of course. It is about the money. And you know why I was extremely disappointed? Because I said, this journalist does not know his history. Because all you had to do was say, listen, Mr. President, if you had not recruited 300,000 West Africans to fight in your wars, you may not even be speaking French today.
Right.
See?
Right.
Then you would have understood.
You might still be dating your school teacher, but you wouldn't be speaking French.
So that was my disappointment in that episode. But yes, so let me go back.
Yeah, tell me.
All those false promises were not delivered. Churchill, FDR, all those guys. So Nkrumah became a big-time agitator, right? So Nkrumah leads Ghana, the first so-called Africa, South of the Sahara country to become independent from Britain. So that was the first wave. And that was a unique time in history because brothers and sisters in the Caribbean now also being caught up in that euphoria of independence on the continent, many of them started coming back to contribute, and sisters and brothers from this country as well. Because Nkrumah's vision was to unite the entire continent. And he said that's the only way we'll be able to survive. Because they wanted our resources yesterday, they will want it today, they will want it tomorrow. So we will be turned into neo-colonies. And that's when the term really became very big, neo-colonialism. We will be independent. It will be like a fictitious independent. We'll have all the trappings of a sovereign state, but so long as the economic policies are determined from outside, it means the politics will also be determined from outside. So that was the first wave. The first wave was undermined because Nkrumah was overthrown in 1966. U.S. CIA-backed military coup. The generals tossed him out. Before he was overthrown in Congo, Lumumba was murdered by the Belgians, by the U.S., and by Britain. Because they thought if this kind of narrative really takes hold, Nkrumah convincing enough of these newly independent countries to form one unified United States of Africa, and then having the resources of the Congo. And then eventually they would be able to eliminate apartheid, much, much earlier, of course, had the continent been united. Then there's a potential that we're going to lose the dirt-free access to all these resources. And that's what it's all about. So Lumumba murdered, Nkrumah overthrown. And then you see a series of coups spreading throughout the continent. All these men with no vision, just running the country to satisfy their needs, their immediate needs, and their inner circle. But the bigger thing is fulfilling the interest of the outside world that wants to continue controlling Africa.
And is it fair to say that, and then we'll get to Thomas Sankara in this next wave, because he comes at the time when the whole continent is dominated in many respects by this.
Absolutely.
What is it? You know, we'll talk about this more next week with Bhaskar Sankara and his new Socialist Manifesto book, which really everybody should read. And again, it's funny because he in no way shies from talking about the obvious, including, the most obvious is the atrocities of Stalinism and the problems inside the Soviet system.
Right.
But one of the things that he's very clear about is on a foreign policy level, and often for self-interested reasons. But the Soviet Union was better in a lot of these things.
Well,
how does
in terms of what?
In terms of backing the ANC,
yes, of
as
course.
an example. So what is the Soviet role?
The Soviet role was phenomenal in Africa because it offered that alternative. Not only the Soviets, China.
And China.
Both are tremendous. A lot of these liberation fighters were trained in Russia, in the Soviet Union then, or trained in China. And in fact, at one point, China and the Soviet Union were competing to see who would be able to train more of these fighters, who would be able to supply them with more weapons. So without the Soviet Union, without China, many of these liberation movements would not have succeeded because they would not have been able to secure the weapons they need. Look at the case of Frelimo, for example, in Mozambique, and then the MPLA in Angola. They were not just fighting the Portuguese, they were fighting against NATO. Because even though Portugal was bound by the NATO rules not to use the weapons from the U.S. that it got to use only for NATO purposes, the U.S. was, turning a blind eye. When the napalm bombs were used against civilians in Angola, in Mozambique.
This is really so. We know about the atrocities of the United States and Vietnam.
Yes,
but Portugal
because that was
also
widely covered. Yes, absolutely.
Angola and Mozambique.
Angola and Mozambique, and there are many. And people can just go on YouTube and Google napalm, Portuguese, in Angolan civilians or Mozambican civilians, and you'll see there are a couple of documentaries. Horrific, killing hundreds or thousands of civilians, and hoping that this would turn the tide against the guerrillas. And of course, that never happens in history. You saw it as, I'm glad you brought up Vietnam. That didn't work, right? No. Because at the end of the day, people want to determine their own destiny. So they fought the Portuguese, but in essence, they were also fighting NATO at the same time. But they won. They won because they were able to get weapons from China, Russia, and then the neighboring African countries, Tanzania, and all those other countries that had already been liberated, were also training them and providing them with sanctuary and a supply line to continue their battle. So, so we have and you know what? It's actually, I keep going back to Nkrumah's generation because that was profoundly important. Had they succeeded, had they not been undermined, imperialism and neocolonialism won the first round, emphatically, completely. Because had only a handful of African countries been able to form a united region, we would not see a lot of the problems that we are having today in many African countries. I hesitate to say any African country is really independent. If you have U.S. Troops based in your country, if your finances determined by the IMF and the World Bank, if you need at least more than 50% of your budget, the budget of a country, from donors from Europe, you tell me, what is the meaning of independence? How do you define independence? Nkrumah was such a visionary, when he said our independence would remain fiction. And what we have in African countries, fictional independence. And that's the broad umbrella, and that's the best way to analyze it. So you have civil wars, you have inter-African wars, but all of them are just manifestations of the fact that these countries are not really independent, trying to determine their own destinies. Otherwise, a lot of these issues would not even be here today. They would be dealing with issues, how to expand technology, right? To compete on the global market with other nations. But instead, the rest of the world using Africa's resources to build up their own economies. So Africa is not even on the table when it comes to conversations. The sad thing. I keep telling this to a lot of people, including my class. I say, go back and look at some of the data, economic data. You'll find that in late 50s, at one point, Ghana had higher per capita income. And sometimes these stats are meaningless, but sometimes they are meaningful when you compare it to others at a particular time in history. But in terms of when they talk about 5, 6, 10% growth rate, you and I know that's nonsense because that only aggregates certain sectors of the economy, but the masses could be actually starving, which is the case. But it's a useful figure.
Steve Pinker.
but it's a useful form to analyze where countries were and where they are today. So at one level, in the late 50s or maybe 1960, Ghana had a quote-unquote higher per capita income than China. That's not the case today, right? Because China has been able to, China is no longer a typical neo-colony, right? It still engages in some forms. It has advantages, some forms it has disadvantages, and you discussed it a few minutes ago briefly. But it engages on its own terms. You cannot go to China and say, I want resources that are buried in the ground in China. I'm going to mine it and take it to my country to build my own industries. And I will determine the price at which I want to buy it. And I also will determine the price at which you will buy the product that I make with your minerals. Think about that.
So we know that the main example of this, right? I mean, not just the one that really, to me, is so visceral. And to the extent, okay, so if Congo is ever covered in the United States,
yes,
or in the world press, it's going to be, oh, there's more civil war, and there's not going to be any explanation of the context of that civil war. And people they very well might not know who Patrice Lumumba is. Or if they said, oh, Mobutu Sese Seko, who ran the country from the early 60s to 1997, oh, this guy is so crazy and brutal, which he was.
Yes, he was.
And he flew to the United States, and he did a shopping spree while his people starved. The CIA and the Belgians installed him, and we backed him for decades. Let's not necessarily mention that.
Right.
But then the other major thing that is fueling the conflict as we speak is this.
Absolutely.
The coltan, is it right?
Yes.
Explain
coltan.
that.
Coltan. Congo, I think, holds about 60% of the world's supplies. And that mineral, as you know, is used in pretty much every electronic equipment in the world. So think about that. So it's
extracted from Congo, sweatshop built in China.
Absolutely.
Here. Right. Okay.
And then Congo gets probably 0.0000001 whatever of any of the value that comes from its resource that's enriching the entire world. So that's one product, coltan. The big one now is going to be cobalt. And Congo has more than 60% of the world's supply as well. And cobalt is going to be big because it's going to be fueling the batteries for electric cars. And electric cars, as we know, is going to be the big wave, the next wave, as we move away, not as fast as we should be moving from fossil fuel. See? And Congo, if it remains the way it is today, is not going to benefit from that. And that's what Nkrumah meant.
And that's also I just want to add why you need to start thinking of things like the Green New Deal in a global way. It's a great policy, and we should support it. And all credit to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Right.
But it needs to be globally integrated. Practically because you can't deal with climate crisis without globally, but also because of precisely of what you're talking about.
Right, but I'm glad you said that.
Yes.
And if I drift away from the stream I was going, try to guide me back. Okay. But because you said that, I have to bring this up. African countries cannot fight this war alone. We can't. It's impossible. It's so let me try to give a local example. Like in this country, if they did not have laws to protect citizens from corporations, think about what would happen.
Well, it is happening.
It is happening. But imagine if the laws didn't even exist.
Yeah.
It would be as bad as it was
feudalism
at the beginning. Remember how bad it was, as bad as it is today, how bad it was when it was completely unregulated.
9-year-olds and the Lowell mills.
Thank you. Yes. And those 9-year-olds are working in the minefields in the Congo today. So if corporations in this country can inflict so much harm on U.S. citizens, imagine a corporate nation like the U.S., because what the U.S. is actually a large corporation, going to Africa, the continent, unpoliced by anyone. Imagine. I don't have to even give you the details of what is really going on. I think that alone should just be scary at the kind of, so for example, you brought up the war in Congo. You notice it's only confined in Eastern Congo. Why? Why is it not in the southern part? Why is it not in the west? Why is it not in central Congo? Why? Because the resources such as coltan confine Eastern Congo. And how can you have a quote-unquote war while companies, there's a whole list, we discussed this I think in one of your shows, that people can Google, corporations exploiting resources in Congo. Go to Google. It'll take you to the UN website. Yep. It lists all these companies. So even though millions of Congolese are dying from this so-called war, I call it so-called because it's manufactured war. It's a corporate war. From those same areas in the East where millions have died, Western corporations are sucking minerals at the same time. So what kind
of war is this? And that's what fuels the conflict. I mean, literally, the weapons would not be moving if that... So let's go. I do want to touch on this is really important, because then there's this other incredible moment and another example for all of us, and because there's that dialectic of the specific conditions of a place, and then the fact that when somebody is a truly dynamic, inspiring, visionary leader, they're an influence for all of us, no matter wherever we are, any time, place, or location.
Yes.
Thomas Sankara. Yeah. Let's play a clip of this documentary, and then Milton, you're going to lead us through Thomas Sankara.
Okay, very good.
Notre pays.
Pause it. I'm sorry. I just should say, if you're listening to this on podcast, some of this will be in English. Some of this, he is speaking in French. Right. So I would encourage you to just watch this. You won't miss much, to be honest, but watch the show we're doing on YouTube, and also, or listen to the podcast we did on it, or look up this documentary. But just so you know, you'll miss a few lines. Go ahead.
Notre pays produit suffisamment de quoi nous nourrir. Nous pouvons dépasser même notre production, malheureusement. Par manque d'organisation, nous sommes encore obligés de tendre la main pour demander des aides alimentaires. Ces aides alimentaires qui nous bloquent, qui nous inspirent, qui installent dans nos esprits cette habitude, ces réflexes de mendiants, d'assister.
Upper Volta, 1983. Thomas Sankara is brought to power by a coup supported by one of the poorest peoples on our planet. Behind a military uniform and a Marxist discourse, Africa discovers a young and dynamic leader, ready to put his innovative ideas at the service of his fellow citizens. Thomas Sankara gives a new name to his country, Burkina Faso, which means the land of upright men.
Il y en a qui demandent, mais où se trouve l'impérialisme? L'impérialisme, regardez dans vos assiettes, quand vous mangez les grains de riz, de maïs, de mil importés, c'est ça l'impérialisme, n'allez pas plus loin.
Little by little, Sankara takes his country out of misery, achieves food self-sufficiency, but clashes with the French, who want to keep control over their former colonies. Above all, they want to avoid by all means that Sankara's ideas spread throughout the region.
La France ne comprend pas l'Afrique. Et il est grand temps qu'elle la comprenne. Qui ici ne souhaite pas que la dette soit purement et simplement effacée? Celui qui ne le souhaite pas, il peut sortir, prendre son avion et aller tout de suite à la Banque mondiale, payer. Tous nous souhaitons.
Thomas Sankara is attacked by those in the north as well as in the south who benefit from Africa's underdevelopment. His closest collaborator, Blaise Compaoré, with the support of foreign powers, will betray him. Killed for his ideas, Thomas Sankara has become the African Che in the eyes of African youth today.
Pour le grand combat patriotique, pour l'avenir radieux de notre pays, la patrie ou la mort, nous vaincrons.
Milton, he was an extraordinary figure. Tell us more about him. Absolutely. And of course, everything you talked about reflected precisely in his explanation of, if you want to find imperialism, look no further than the plate that you're eating from.
You have imported food, your rice, your corn, your millet imported. How is that possible when you have been growing food for centuries? Think about that. But you develop this dependency syndrome now as a result of the colonial and then neo-colonial relationship. You know, you even import bottled water from France. Come on, man. Right? Think about that. So it was an awakening, but the issues that the people of Burkina Faso, first of all, he changed the name from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, meant land of the righteous people, or the upright people, or the incorruptible people. So you can translate it a couple of ways.
Where did he come from? Like, where did he come from?
Very good.
He was young.
He was young.
How did he get radicalized?
He was in the military from a very young age, but he was teaching himself as well. He understood history because he read history books. He understood economics because he read the so-called neoclassical, but he also read Marxist economics. So he understood the motion of history, understood the issues. Not only was he a charismatic young officer like Jerry Rawlings, for example, was in Ghana.
Ghana.
Right. He seized power in 1983. Initially started off by executing those generals that had gotten rid of Nkrumah. So there was a question of would he be able to stabilize things. But he actually did. But Sankara had a higher level of consciousness. He was much more read when it comes to understanding global economics and the details behind it. Rawlings did. He understood Africa's role in the global economy as providers of raw material, of labor, and as consumers of manufactured goods. So he knew that part. But I think Sankara had a much more detailed knowledge. He could have taught political economy.
Oh, he would have been a very popular professor.
Yeah, think about that.
Keeping it down to earth like that too, though. So what did he? I see that with all of these great articulators. Right. They bring it home like that. Yeah. So how he took over the country? How many years did he run it for, and what did he achieve? And then Blaise Compaoré portrayed him.
Yeah,
What's
Blaise
the story?
Compaoré was actually his closest friend at some point. In fact, he was under house arrest when Blaise Compaoré launched the coup to free him and then said, listen, you are our leader. And that's how he became the president in the first place. And he only lasted 4 years.
So what were those years, 79 to...
83 to 87.
83 to 87. He ran. And what did he
But
achieve?
in the short time,
yes,
he just unleashed a level of pride, consciousness, and ambition that the country had never seen before. He empowered women, for example. He didn't give them just these token jobs. He actually gave them real jobs like officials in the government, ministers in the government. He recruited them in the military, had them trained, and joined the army as weapons. That had never been seen before in West Africa. He had one day, and then the documentary that you played bits of has a lot of some of the details. So I strongly recommend it as well. On Women's Day, he said the men should go out and shop today so they understand, how women have been able to keep them alive with the little money that they provide to them. He empowered the youth, and he changed the relationship between young men and young women. Said, how is it possible that you, a young boy in high school, you can impregnate a young lady, and the lady is the one that gets expelled from school while you stay on like you had nothing to do with it. Right. So he changed the thought process in the entire country, but he also had concrete things that you could point to, like the food sufficiency. Within 3 years, the country became food sufficient. The country built its first rail line that was domestically built with domestic resources without getting a loan for it because everybody rolled up their sleeves, including he himself. And he went to some of the urban areas that had these ramshackle buildings. And he said, why are you living in these when you can actually make solid buildings that also look good? And nobody had told people that this is what you should do. They did that. He was way ahead when it came to environmentalism, got people to plant 10 million trees, rather. He said, this desertification that's creeping up and eating up our country, you can actually stop this. You can play an agent in stopping this. You don't have to just be a victim and see it eating up your farm, your farmland shrinking. And so people, not only did they listen to him, but they participated in taking control of their lives. He got schools built in every community in the country. He got health centers built in every community in the country. And you played the part in the clip where he spoke to the other African presidents. at the Organization of African Unity meeting in Addis Ababa. That was July 1987. And you heard the reaction of the other African presidents.
He was saying what they all wanted to say.
What they wanted to say, but could not dare say.
Right.
We just have to collectively renounce this debt, because not many people know this. In some cases, African countries inherited these debts at the time of independence. That's why I keep telling you, independence is fiction. How could you say, okay, now we are bringing colonial regime to an end. You are the new leadership in Africa now. But by the way, while we were running this country as a colony for the last 70, 80 years or so, we incurred debt that you will now have to assume responsibility for. So I said, we can't continue this relationship because we would have no resources to build up our own economies. But we can't do it individually. He said, if I do it alone, as Thomas Sankara, I won't be here for the next annual meeting of the Organization of African Unity. That was July 1987. October, he was dead. 1987.
So, and just to be clear, and listen back to the podcast and watch the documentary, because I want to move forward in the last couple of minutes before we get to the post game. But portrayed by Blaise Compaoré, yes, with the direct support of the French government,
and Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast.
And Ivory Coast.
Yeah, because Côte d'Ivoire is the ultimate neo-colony of neo-colonies in Africa, of France. And at that time, Houphouët-Boigny was very close to France. In fact, I don't know whether he considered himself French or Ivorian. Was given the dirty job to convince Blaise to get rid of Sankara, because the example that Sankara was setting was spreading in West Africa, was spreading throughout the African continent, and that was a bad example. And then also Houphouët-Boigny and his country, Ivory Coast, had a direct potential of losing too, because many of the farm workers who work in the cocoa fields in the Ivory Coast are migrant workers from Burkina Faso. And Sankara was saying, no, you can actually be involved in agriculture in your own country now. We'll be growing our own food for ourselves and for export. There's no need for you to be an exploited worker now in the Ivory Coast. So Houphouët-Boigny and Ivory Coast also had a direct interest in getting Sankara eliminated.
So then in 2016, correct, I believe, and please now connect this, because we got to I guess three different things. Closing the loop on what happened with Blaise Compaoré, then this new uprising, a third wave of the African awakening.
Correct.
And also your home in this really, I mean, Museveni is like, to me, in some ways, when I think of him or someone like Omar al-Bashir, they are actually, they're not just, what a bad leader. They are literally bad leaders in Africa, but they are the prototype of the Trumps, of the Orbans, of the Bolsonaros, of what people are experiencing. Absolutely. What we have supported overseas is sort of coming here, but there's a movement in Uganda too, and it's all part of the same loop. So what happened in Burkina Faso in 2016, and then link it with Uganda and these new...
Right, 2016, they had the election by that time, because by 2014, they had driven Blaise Compaoré away. He tried to extend himself. After 27 years, he wanted to change the constitution again, and they went to the symbol, which is the parliament, the youth, and they burned the parliament down. And that's when his own officers knew they were serious. And they said, listen, we don't all want to go down with you, so you have to go.
Right.
And he fled the country. He tried to make a comeback through one of his generals that was still involved about a year later in a botched coup. That general ended up getting locked up too. They had elections, so hopefully they're moving in the right direction now. And the youth feel at least that they're empowered because they played a role in changing the leadership there. Okay, so now we had recent changes in the Sudan. We had recent changes further up in Algeria, where you saw young people came out in massive numbers in the streets. And in Algeria, they had a pretend president, Bouteflika, a guy who was semi-comatose on a wheelchair, and people giving the fiction that he was somehow running the country.
It was like a weekend at Bernie's presidency.
Absolutely. And he was supposed to run again for a 5th term. And people said, no, enough is enough is enough. And then from there, the same action spread to Sudan, where Omar al-Bashir has been a dictator for 30 years now. It started as a food protest, a bread protest. Bread is one of the major staples, particularly in the urban areas. The price went up by 300%, while the size shrunk by more than 50%. You needed a license to buy more than, I think, 10 quantities of 10 loaves of bread. So it was, the people are really pressed. And then, of course, the country has this tremendous debt as well, $10 billion. So people are really being sucked, and they said enough is enough.
Well, what about now? Because that's, and this is important in Sudan, because there's a really vicious, horrific crackdown happening right now.
There's a counter reaction.
And so this is what they're dealing with, because what people have learned just even in the modern cycle, I mean, Egypt is the quintessential example. You can't just get rid of the head. You have to get rid of this whole system.
Exactly.
And so Omar al-Bashir-ism still exists in Sudan.
Yes.
Even the way that what's targeting the protesters are these gangs and militias. That's what you used in Bosnia. That's what all governments use.
Absolutely.
So when you have this new wave of awakenings, they have to deal with dictatorships, systems of plunder and patronage, and the outside interference of places like the United States.
And us here, the conscious folks in the U.S., we need to lend our voice to this, because it's not like we're completely blameless either. It's a government here that we may detest, but, we are, as citizens in this country, we need to play a role in saying that, no, it can't be business as usual. We won't just stand back and see the Sudanese being massacred, probably from Western weapons that probably come from the U.S. or Britain or France. Anyway, so yes, you're right, the militia, these are elements that used to be in the Janjaweed. The folks who were committing all those atrocities in Darfur are the ones that are commanded by a general named General Mohammed Dogola, and he's the deputy head of this so-called transition system that they had in place. And now he's been convinced, I believe, by Saudi Arabia and the UAE, United Arab Emirates, that no, you need to clamp down now, because Saudi Arabia does not want to lose access to the young Sudanese, including teenagers, that are being sent to fight on behalf of Saudi Arabia in Yemen. So that's what they don't want to lose. They will do anything, including trying to undermine the ongoing revolution in Sudan. But Sudan has the most highly organized student class and professional class, and they have been successful in the past in getting rid of military dictatorships at least 3 or 4 times, if I'm not mistaken. So if they think that they can really undermine, the casualties will go up, but the Sudanese people are not going to be cowed. I haven't seen a case in the past where they actually pushed a military dictator out and then he came back. So if Bashir is trying to come back, I don't think that's going to work. But the sad thing is, we don't want a civil war going on in Sudan, because next door, South Sudan is very unstable. There's a very nasty civil war going on there. So imagine Sudan, civil war, South Sudan, civil war. It'll probably spill into Ethiopia. And Ethiopia is having its own reawakening. That could be upset. And then, obviously, it would spill in Uganda as well. And as Ugandans are determined to get rid of Museveni, the last thing they need is a civil war spilling into Uganda as well. Because so far, the urban protest is being very effective in Uganda. People are now defying the armed forces and the police for the first time, when the armed forces and police are sometimes sent to arrest politicians that are giving a rally. People physically intervene and grab the politician, whoever is speaking, and protect them. And the soldiers, in the past, this would not be allowed to happen. They would just open fire with live ammo. But I think many of the soldiers now also can see the writing on the wall, that the Museveni dictatorship, after 33 years, is coming to an end. That's my only way to explain what is going on in Uganda today. You mentioned Bobby Wine, the musician turned member of parliament turned leader of what they're calling the People Power Movement, the youth movement. In Uganda, the youth make up 80% of the population, and about 85% are unemployed. So it's just a ticking, a time bomb. So I think the regime can see that it's going to be very difficult to steal the next election, which is in 2 years' time. So the next 24 months going to be very, very interesting in Uganda. Will the dictator finally be pushed out? Would he unleash the kind of reaction we are seeing in the Sudan today? Will members of his armed forces be willing to commit those kind of atrocities in a major form? Or will there be a split in the army? Because two of the key opposition leaders, Kizza Besigye and General Muntu, who just founded a new party called Alliance for National Transformation, both used to be members of the army as well. They were actually Museveni colleagues who fell out after the first 10 years of his regime, who said, listen, we actually thought you meant it when you said ours would be a 10-year transitional period, we'd write a new constitution, and the country would go back to civilian rule. You lied to us. So both of them are parted ways now. But I bring their names up because they also have significant followers in the military. So the military is not completely united behind Museveni. So they may not be willing to commit outright atrocities collectively against Ugandans.
Milton Allimadi, this is just an amazing journey, and we're going to do a ton more of it on future shows, and you're going to stick around for some of the post-game, I hope.
Sure,
okay.
Absolutely.
So, guys, we're going to go to the post-game in a minute. As I always say, the way this show happens is by you, so become a patron today. Become a member at patreon.com/TMBS. We're getting into the horizon of our first 50,000 subscribers on YouTube, so if you haven't yet, click subscribe and start sending around the content. So we can continue to grow that way as well and be a force for something very different on YouTube. I'll keep you posted on all the other appearances and things like that coming up. Get your tickets. Get your tickets to the TMBS Chicago live show. You're absolutely not going to want to miss that. Brooklyn and LA were amazing, both. And check out me with Anna Kasparian on No Filter. Check out all of Anna's work and us talking about the coup in Brazil, Lula da Silva's political imprisonment. Ton to get to in the postgame. Thanks you to everybody. Thank you to Matt. Thank you, David. Thank you, David. Thank you, Forrest. Thank you, Vic. Thank you, Artesia. Thank you, the new, soon-to-be-announced, sometime co-host, which some people are already guessing who she is. So, I mean, I will say it's not going to be a shock who this person is, but it still will be incredibly fun and exciting. So, appreciate all of you. See you patrons in the postgame.